The old ranch looked like a place everyone had forgotten. The wind pushed against broken fences. Empty barns groaned beneath the afternoon sun, and dry grass-covered fields that had not seen real care in years. Most people drove past without slowing down. They saw failure. They saw a property that would never recover. But one exhausted single father saw something different. He saw the only chance left to give his little daughter a future. What nobody could have imagined was that only days after he signed the papers, a luxury pickup rolled through the dusty entrance, carrying the daughter of the wealthiest rancher in the county, and her arrival would uncover a secret, powerful enough to change both of their lives forever. Before we begin this emotional journey, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Soulful Tales 2 for more unforgettable stories that warm the heart. Elias Mercer had never expected life to become this hard. Only 5 years earlier, he had owned a small construction company, a modest home, and dreams of giving his family everything they deserved. Then tragedy arrived without warning. His wife, Marin, lost her battle with a sudden illness, leaving him alone to raise their 7-year-old daughter, Nora. Medical bills swallowed nearly everything they owned. Customers disappeared, as Elias spent more time caring for his family than managing his business. Within 2 years, he had lost his company, sold his house, and accepted every odd job he could find just to keep food on the table. Even during the darkest nights, Nora never complained. She carried hope with the quiet strength only children sometimes possess. She would smile while eating simple meals, tell her father that tiny apartments could still feel like castles, and remind him that as long as they stayed together, they already had everything that mattered. Those words became the only light Elias carried through endless days of hard labor. One rainy afternoon, while helping demolish an abandoned warehouse, Elias overheard 2 workers laughing about an old ranch nobody wanted. The property had been abandoned for nearly 20 years after the previous owner died without family. Every buyer who visited eventually walked away because restoring the land would cost a fortune. To everyone else, it was worthless. To Elias, it sounded like an impossible dream waiting for someone desperate enough to believe. After weeks of careful thinking, he gathered every dollar he had managed to save. He sold his pickup, borrowed a small amount from an old friend, and bought the neglected ranch at an auction for far less than anyone expected. People in town whispered that grief had finally clouded his judgment. They said no single father could rebuild hundreds of acres with nothing but worn-out tools and determination. The first morning on the ranch began before sunrise. The broken farmhouse smelled of dust and forgotten years. Windows rattled in the wind, and parts of the roof leaked whenever clouds gathered overhead. Nora looked around with wide eyes before smiling brightly. She told her father it was the biggest adventure they had ever started. Her excitement made the empty rooms feel alive again. Every day became a battle against impossible odds. Elias repaired fences using salvaged lumber. He cleaned the abandoned barn board by board. He planted vegetables beside the farmhouse, because grocery money was becoming scarce. At night, his hands bled from splinters and cracked skin. Yet every morning he stood up before dawn, determined to keep going. Nora helped however she could. She painted old fences, collected loose nails, watered young plants, and proudly declared herself the ranch's smallest worker. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the forgotten property began changing. Grass returned to neglected fields. Chickens wandered freely across the yard. Wildflowers appeared where weeds had once ruled. The ranch was still far from beautiful, but it was no longer abandoned. It had a heartbeat again. One bright afternoon, while Elias repaired a gate near the entrance, the quiet sound of an expensive engine echoed along the dirt road. A silver luxury pickup rolled toward the farmhouse, shining beneath the daylight like something from another world. Elias straightened his hat, unsure why someone so wealthy had come to such an isolated place. The truck stopped near the gate and a young woman stepped out. She wore practical ranch clothes that looked far too expensive for ordinary farm work. Her confident posture suggested she had spent her entire life around successful ranches, yet there was uncertainty in her eyes as she looked across the land. Her name was Vivian Ashcroft, the only daughter of the richest cattle rancher for hundreds of miles. The Ashcroft family owned thousands of acres surrounding the valley. Their ranch employed dozens of workers, and produced some of the finest cattle in the region. Everyone knew the Ashcroft name. Everyone respected it. Some even feared it. Vivian slowly walked toward Elias, studying every repaired fence, every cleaned pasture, every fresh patch of growing grass. She seemed surprised that anyone had managed to bring life back to land everyone else had abandoned. She admitted that she had not come to buy the ranch. Instead, she wanted to understand why someone with so little had chosen to rebuild what even wealthy investors considered hopeless. Her curiosity had grown after hearing local rumors about the hardworking single father refusing to surrender despite overwhelming odds. As she listened to Elias describe his dreams, something inside her quietly shifted. She had grown up surrounded by wealth, but had rarely witnessed determination born from genuine love. Instead of profit, watching Nora proudly carry buckets of water beside her father reminded Vivian of simpler values she had almost forgotten. Over the following weeks, she returned several times during daylight hours. Sometimes she brought seeds from her family's greenhouse. Other times, she delivered old farming equipment that her ranch no longer needed. Elias accepted only what he could repay through labor, refusing charity because dignity meant everything to him. The friendship between their families slowly deepened. Nora adored Vivian, who patiently taught her about horses, caring for livestock, and reading weather patterns across open fields. For the first time since losing her mother, Nora laughed with the carefree joy of childhood. Not everyone welcomed these visits. Vivian's father, Roland Ashcroft, believed poor people always expected handouts. When he discovered his daughter spending time at the abandoned ranch, he demanded she stay away. He insisted the Mercers would eventually ask for money or land. His opinions had been shaped by years of difficult business deals, leaving little room for trust. Vivian quietly ignored his warnings. Then, one afternoon, while exploring an old storage shed behind the farmhouse, Nora discovered a weathered wooden chest hidden beneath collapsed floorboards. Inside rested faded maps, yellowed letters, and a leather journal belonging to the ranch's original owner. The journal revealed that decades earlier, the abandoned ranch and the Ashcroft property had once belonged to two inseparable brothers who dreamed of building one thriving community together. After a terrible misunderstanding fueled by dishonest businessmen, the brothers separated, dividing the land and carrying resentment for the rest of their lives. The heartbreaking truth shocked everyone. Roland's own grandfather had unknowingly inherited half the story, believing the neighboring family had betrayed them. The journal proved neither brother had been responsible. Greedy outsiders had manipulated documents, destroyed trust, and profited while both families suffered generations of bitterness. Vivian showed the journal to her father. At first, Roland refused to believe it. Pride had protected his version of history for decades, but as historians confirmed, the journal's authenticity and forgotten county records matched its details. The painful truth became impossible to deny. Roland drove to Elias's ranch alone one peaceful afternoon. Instead of arriving with anger, he quietly removed his hat before walking toward the weathered farmhouse. He looked across the repaired fences and blooming fields before, admitting that he had judged both the land and the man far too quickly. He confessed that watching a struggling father rebuild hope with his own hands had forced him to question the values wealth had taught him. Money had expanded his ranch, but compassion was what truly built a legacy. Without seeking ownership or control, Roland offered experienced workers to help repair the remaining barns. Elias accepted only after insisting. Every hour of labor would eventually be repaid. Through work or harvest, Roland smiled for the first time in years, realizing integrity could never be purchased. That summer transformed the forgotten ranch into one of the valley's most beautiful properties. Neighbors who once laughed at Elias began volunteering on weekends. Families donated fruit trees. Local carpenters repaired the farmhouse porch. Children played across green fields that months earlier had seemed lifeless. The annual harvest festival arrived beneath clear blue skies. For the first time in decades, both ranches celebrated together instead of competing. Long tables stretched beneath open skies as music drifted across the valley. Elderly residents wiped tears from their eyes, amazed to witness old divisions finally disappear. Elias stood quietly beside Nora as she chased butterflies through the fields. He remembered every sleepless night, every painful sacrifice, every moment he nearly surrendered. Looking around, he understood that true wealth had never been measured by land, cattle, or bank accounts. It lived inside people willing to rebuild hope when everyone else had already given up. Vivian watched the celebration with gratitude, knowing one unexpected visit had rewritten the future of two families. She realized courage often hides inside ordinary people whose stories the world almost overlooks. If this story has touched your heart, please write in the comments. Kindness always finds its way home. As the golden afternoon sun settled gently across the valley, the once forgotten ranch stood as living proof that broken places can bloom again when someone believes they are worth saving. Elias had purchased abandoned land, believing he was simply giving his daughter a chance at a better life. Instead, he restored an entire community's forgotten history, healed generations of pain, and reminded everyone that the richest harvest always grows from compassion, humility, perseverance, and hope. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin the moment one ordinary person refuses to walk away from what everyone else has abandoned. If this story moved you even a little, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Soulful Tales too. Your support helps us continue bringing heartwarming stories of hope, courage, forgiveness, and second chances to people around the world. Until next time, remember that every act of kindness plants a seed whose harvest may change lives forever.